Hello everyone, welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy daily newspaper analysis. Today is 23rd July 2024 Tuesday, and today we have a few important articles from different newspapers. We'll try to understand and we'll try to discuss all these important articles one by one. And before actually discussing all these important news articles, let's try to solve a previous question that I have given to you yesterday. The question was, the minorities which was stated under the Indian Constitution Article 30 include which of the following types of minorities? So your options are option A, linguistic minorities only, option B, religious minorities only, option C, both linguistic and religious minorities, and option D, ethnic minorities. So understand, this is a very simple question. This is also a simple and easy questions. If you go through all these fundamental rights, especially Article 30 of the Indian Constitution, you can answer this question. So the correct answer for this question is linguistic and religious minorities, right? So the rights of minorities under Article 30 would be applicable for both linguistic as well as religious minorities. Now, what is minority as per Indian Constitution? Now understand, Indian Constitution nowhere defined the term minority, even though Constitution mentioned the term minority, but Constitution nowhere defined the term minority. And in fact, Article 30 clause 1 uses terms such as linguistic minorities or religious minorities. In which article? Article 30 clause 1 of the Indian Constitution use these terms, linguistic minority and religious minority. But understand one thing, that Constitution has nowhere defined the term minority, but Constitution mentioned about this term minority. In fact, the word or means that minority may either be linguistic minority or religious minority, and that it does not have to be both. Okay, so and apart from that, it is sufficient to be one of them, either a linguistic minority or a religious minority. So those people would be eligible under the Article 30 of the Indian Constitution to establish and administer educational institutions of their own choice. So there are special rights which were granted to the Indian Constitution to the minorities. Now today also I have one important practice question. The question is, Nowroj, it was it marks the beginning of a new year, and it is celebrated mainly by which of the following community in India? And understand, this is also a very, very important question. So why I am emphasizing that this is an important question? Because UPSC already asked about this Nowroj festival in its previous questions. So UPSC already asked about this festival. So therefore, Nowroj, which makes the beginning of new year, is celebrated mainly by which of the following communities in India? Your options are option A, Jains, option B, Sikhs, and option C, Parsis, and option D, Christians. So this is a simple question. Try to answer this question in the comment section, and correct answer and the explanation for this particular question I'll be providing you in tomorrow's class. And we also started an initiative that where we will daily discuss one important mains newspaper based question also. So there was MSMEs are very frequently in news, so we'll discuss about the a question on MSMEs, micro, small and medium enterprises. So this is very, very important question, because general studies paper 3, there were instances of this particular question repeated multiple times by the UPSC. So therefore it is very important that you have a solid and a proper content about the micro, small and medium enterprises. You understand the MSMEs and their importance for the economy and inclusive growth in India. And MSMEs are also not free from the challenges. They have been facing number of and numerous challenges. So you have to talk about that particular challenges, and you should give a way forward, and then you have to conclude the answer. Now, if you look at the question, MSME sector is a key driver of economic growth in India. Yes, no doubt about that. It is a key driver of economic growth in India, but it has been facing a significant credit gap. The problem is MSMEs lack institutional credit access. So in this respect, what are the challenges which are being associated with MSMEs and lending to MSMEs, and how can innovative financial instruments be developed to cater to the unique needs of these MSMEs discussed? So that is the question that I'm given to you. Now the approach of the question. So how can we approach this question? Because so we need to structure it, and that is very important. Now before writing any answer, you need to have a proper framework, a proper structure in place. Only then you can write the best possible answer, and you can also get good marks. And if you look at the answer, in the the introduction, you briefly define MSMEs. So what constitutes MSMEs, or you can also write the importance of MSMEs, its contribution for the employment and its contribution to India's exports and its contribution to GDP. So you can also write about the importance and the significance of MSMEs in the introduction itself. And in next, in the body part of the answer as asked in the question, so just write how MSMEs are the key driver of Indian economy. So you actually write some points mentioning that how MSME actually the key driver of Indian economy. And third, within the body part itself, so write some challenges that the MSME sector has been facing in recent times. And then you also write about innovative financial instruments that to be developed as it was asked in the question. Now one thing that you have to do, you need to divide the question into multiple parts and address each of these parts. And finally you conclude this answer by stressing on the need to revive MSMEs for inclusive growth in India. So that is how you need to structure this answer. Now if you look at the answer for this question, so as I have already told you, you either define MSMEs or write some data about the importance and the significance of MSMEs to Indian economy, right? So in fact, without any doubt, MSMEs are a key driver of Indian economy. Okay, so apart from a key driver of Indian economy, MSMEs are also very well known that they create a large scale gainful employment opportunities for the India's youth. And in fact, when we talk about the data with respect to the employment potential of these MSMEs have been providing 110 million employment opportunities for Indian people. So apart from that, it is a key source of livelihood for many millions of people in several rural areas. However, even though there is a lot of importance which is being associated with the MSMEs are also not free from the challenges. That essentially means that MSMEs are also facing numerous challenges. Now what are those challenges? We'll understand those challenges, but first and foremost we'll understand so how MSME is a key economic driver for Indian economy. So we'll understand that. Now as we have already discussed that it is a key employment generator. It has been creating around 110 million employment opportunities for India's population. And apart from that, you have to understand one thing, MSMEs also play a very important role in women empowerment, because MSME is a sector which employs the largest number of women in the informal sector. So therefore, when it has been providing a huge employment opportunities, so it is of course a source of livelihood for the millions of people in rural areas. And we have plans to shift excess workforce from the agriculture to industry. So MSME is one of the potential area, a sector which could absorb excess workforce from the agriculture sector. And apart from that, MSME also plays a very important role because it contributes to India's GDP, right? So in fact, MSMEs contributes around 30% of India's total GDP, and this is one of the very significant and very important number. Now if you look at the contribution of agriculture sector to Indian GDP, so it is just around 18 to 90%, so hovering around 18% to 20%. But you just look at MSME's contribution to Indian economy, it is around 30% to India's GDP. And in fact, these MSMEs also play a very important role in the growth of manufacturing sector, and manufacturing sector is very often a labor intensive sector. It creates a gainful employment opportunities, so therefore it absorbs the excess workforce and reduces the unemployment levels in the Indian economy. So after that, it also contributes to the regional development. Regional disparities is one of the key challenge in the Indian economic growth and development. So therefore, MSMEs are not very often located in the big metropolitan cities. So they are very often located in small cities or rural areas. So therefore, these MSMEs play a very, very important role in rural development and reducing the regional disparities and overall promoting the inclusive growth and development across India. And that is the objective of several governments over a period of time. However, MSMEs actually play a very important role in inclusive growth and development of Indian economy. And we should not forget the role that MSMEs can play in India's total exports. Now, if you look at MSMEs contribution, 34% of India's total exports or contributed by the MSMEs alone. So therefore MSMEs also play one of the most important and most significant role in India's export, and they also play this important role in brand image of India and Indian products across the globe. However, MSMEs are not free from the challenges. They have been facing number of challenges. Now, when we talk about the challenges that the MSMEs have been facing, so they have the problems with respect to access to finance. Very often the institutional credit is not accessible to these MSMEs. So that is the one of the biggest challenge that these MSMEs have been facing. However, these MSMEs, if they approach banks for the institutional credit, they struggle to get access to the loans. They struggle to get access to the institutional credit from the formal financial institutions, right? So why banks very often deny loans for these MSMEs? Because there are number of reasons. They lack collateral, right? So collateral is required whenever banks have been giving loans with a higher amount. So therefore there's a lack of collateral on the part of MSMEs and a limited financial history of these MSMEs, and even banks offering higher interest rate, that would be a kind of a disincentive on the part of these MSMEs, and all these factors have been leading to reduced credit access to these MSMEs. And we should not forget the infrastructure, especially the poor infrastructure in rural areas. For example, wherever these MSMEs are located, there is a very poor infrastructure, a poor transportation infrastructure that increases the logistics cost. For example, imagine that these MSMEs require raw materials, and in order to transport raw materials, so they have to incur higher cost, and therefore the poor infrastructure is also another factor which impacts the MSME functioning, and lack of power and water supply would also be another factor. So this makes it difficult for these MSMEs to operate efficiently, and they were also very often failed to meet the customer demand as well. So other thing that we need to understand is a lack of skilled workforce, and lack of skilled workforce also impacts the productivity of these MSMEs very often. So either they are lack of skilled or semi-skilled workers. So since they lack skills, the productivity drops in these MSMEs, and very often they incur losses over a period of time. So MSMEs very often require skilled workers in order to operate their businesses much more effectively and efficiently. So but the problem is that these MSMEs are struggling to attract and retain the skilled workforce due to the competitive compensation and benefits which were offered by the other industries. So this is another factor. And apart from that, MSMEs are also lagged behind in terms of technology adoption. So they very often not adopted technology efficiently and effectively. Many MSMEs are slow to adopt new technologies. So they very often fail to adopt technology, and technology is very important to increase production and productivity of these MSMEs. So that therefore they would remain competitive. Okay, so when they increase their production, so they would remain competitive with the large scale industrialized or technology adopted capital intensive industries. But MSMEs are slow to adopt new technologies, and that can put them in a disadvantaged position compared to the larger companies. So this can actually make it difficult for these MSMEs to compete in the market and keep up with the changing customer demands. So these are the challenges that the MSMEs have been facing over a period of time in India. So however, the third part of the question, that is innovative financial instruments that have to be developed to cater to the unique demands or unique needs of these MSMEs. So when we talk about the lack of access to institutional credit for these MSMEs, so we have said that we have already discussed that lack of collateral is one reason that led to banks very often denying loans to the MSMEs. So therefore there should be collateral free loans to the MSMEs. So one way through which we can address the challenge of collateral is to develop collateral free loan products specifically for MSMEs. So that would help MSMEs gain access to the institutional credit, right? So this can be done through alternative credit assessment of these MSMEs, and cash flow analysis of MSMEs, and even credit history assessment of the MSMEs can be done through which the collateral free loans can be provided to assess the ability of these MSMEs to repay the loans. And apart from that, the supply chain management or supply chain financing is also very, very important, because if you look at many of these MSMEs, so they operate in complex supply chains. So these supply chains are not very often simple and flexible in nature, but they are very often complex supply chains. And in fact, they are also facing the financing challenges. Because of complex supply chains, financing can be a challenge. In this context, these supply chain financing can help by providing financing to MSMEs based on their relationship with the larger companies in the overall supply chain. And after that, the digital financial services. So MSMEs are often operate in remote areas. So they often operate in remote areas, and they may not have access to the traditional banking services. So this is also another major problem that MSMEs have been facing. So therefore, in this context, the digital financial services have to be developed, such as mobile banking. So these digital financial services actually help these MSMEs to have access to the financial services more easily and at a lower cost. And we need to talk about we have addressed the demand of the question, and write a brief conclusion mentioning the how we can revive these MSMEs, right? So by addressing these challenges of collateral, supply chain financing of these MSMEs, access to digital financial services, and other things such as invoice financing and credit guarantees, these financial institutions can better serve the needs of the MSMEs and support their growth and success, and that will in turn contribute to the inclusive growth and development of Indian economy, because MSMEs create a large scale employment potential in the Indian economy, and MSME sector would also contributes to India's GDP, and it also contributes to overall export growth. So the first article that we are going to start this discussion is with heat stress is more than a degree of concern. Okay, so in recent times, heat wave like condition, the frequency and the intensity of heat waves has been substantially or significantly increasing. So that is the one of the most serious issue. Okay, so why heat stress has been increasing? Climate change is one reason, and this climate change has been leading to the increasing frequency and intensity of heat waves in India. So however, this heat wave like condition create heat stress, and it impacts the health of the workers who very often engaged in the informal or unorganized sector, such as construction as an example, agriculture is an example, because very often they have to work longer periods of time outside. So therefore, this particular heat stress or increasing intensity and frequency of heat waves is more often more than a degree of concern. So there is a lot of concern which is being associated with this heat stress. Now we'll understand the context of this particular editorial that is given in one of the newspapers. So the context is that climate change and environmental degradation have significant impact on the safety and health of the workers across the world. There is no doubt that climate change has been leading to the increasing temperatures, heat wave and heat stress like conditions, and even environmental degradation has also impacting the health of not just workers and even everyone, because environmental degradation contributes to pollution and pollution of soil, water, air. So all these factors over a period of time leading to the safety and health risk of people across the world, but workers in particular. And in fact, this particular heat stress or heat wave like conditions are expected or anticipated to affect the labor efficiency and productivity. Yes, there is no doubt when labor have been working in larger a large period of time outside and they are being exposed to this heat stress, of course it would reduces their productivity over a period of time along with their efficiency also. And in turn, when the productivity and efficiency is being reduced, so it would reduce the work hours and it would further hinder their overall productivity. As per the in fact, the International Labour Organization objective was to promote fair and decent employment for all. But when the workers are exposed to heat stress like conditions, it would in fact hinder the objective of promoting fair and decent employment opportunities for all the workers across India. Okay, so when we talk about the heat stress related impact on the workers who are exposed to the heat wave for a longer hours, so they would suffer a different symptoms, or their health would be affected because of heat stroke, heat cramps, cardiovascular diseases, acute kidney injury and physical injury. So when workers are working outside, they are exposed to heat stress, so they would face all these problems over a period of time, and that reduces their efficiency and productivity also. They will not be able to work. So imagine countries which are poor, countries where there are higher levels of unemployment, where a larger number of workers would prefer to work outside because of lack of proper employment opportunities in the formal sector. So therefore, more and more people would be exposed to the heat stress, and they would suffer all these problems over a period of time, and it would also contribute to poverty. Okay, why? Because once they suffer all these problems, they may not be able to go for work. So if they don't, they may not be able to go for work. Again, the chronic cycle of poverty would start. Okay, so in fact, according to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change data, so it actually states that to retain normal physiological activities, for any individual, for any worker to retain normal physiological activities, it is very, very important and necessary to maintain the core body temperature of roughly 37 degrees Celsius. So this is the core body temperature that has to be maintained by the workers. And in fact, the International Labour Organization has also conducted a detailed survey on the impact of heat stress on the workers' health and at the same time the economies of different countries. So according to this particular study, International Labour Organization predicted that heat stress would reduce the total working hours worldwide by 2.2%. Okay, so total working hours across the world because of the heat stress would be reduced by 2.2%, and global GDP will be further declined by 2,400 billion by 2030. So you can imagine the impact of heat wave on the workforce and working hours, productivity and efficiency of the workers and the total global GDP. And in fact, the agriculture and construction workers also expected to be the worst affected. So you knew why agriculture and construction workers are worst affected, because they do not have any sort of a protection from the heat stress or heat wave like conditions. Very often they work longer hours outside, exposed to the heat stress, and because of that reason both construction and agricultural workers would be worst affected because of the heat stress. And in fact, these agriculture and construction workers accounting for 60% and 19% respectively of total workers who would be exposed to the heat wave like conditions by 2030 according to the ILO statistics. However, there are number of countries which are susceptible to the experiencing decrease or susceptible to experiencing decreases in productivity, because there are number of poor countries where majority of its workforce are engaged in the informal sector or unorganized sector. Now in this case, those countries would be increasingly susceptible to decreases in productivity. So particularly those countries where majority of its workforce engaged in agriculture and construction sectors, so they would be more and more vulnerable to declining productivity because of increasing exposure to the heat wave like conditions, especially the countries which are located in tropical and subtropical latitudes. The countries which are located in tropical and subtropical latitudes are mostly vulnerable to increasing heat stress. And apart from that, the decline in available workforce hours, or number of working hours, will also decline because of the increasing heat stress over a period of time. And output among the small scale and subsistence farmers expected to affect the household food security also, because when farmers are not going into the field because of excess heat stress, or when the productivity of the farmers would reduce over a period of time, that will also impact the agriculture production as well. So that over a period of time would also impact the household food security as well. And in fact, the heat stress actually poses concerns that having a potential of exacerbating the gender disparities also, because when we look into the impact of heat stress on men and women, so it also create a huge differences. There are a lot of gender disparities with respect to the impact of heat wave on both men and women workforce. Okay, so this would expected to deteriorate the working conditions of numerous women who have been engaged in this subsistence agriculture. Now you very often come across the term feminization of agriculture, where large number of women have been working in the agriculture sector. So that essentially means that women would be exposed to the increasing heat stress and heat wave like conditions, and their efficiency and productivity as a workforce declines over a period of time. Now it is a good that women's workforce participation in rural areas has been increasing at a rapid pace, but because of the heat stress and heat wave like conditions, so since it will have a lot of impact on working women, so that would also another factor that discourages women's engagement in the agriculture sector, and workforce participation of women in the agriculture sector will also decline. So apart from that, we should not undermine the role of heat stress and heat wave like conditions on sustainable development goals. So remember that all countries are aimed to achieve these sustainable development goals by 2030, but it is expected that excessive heat stress will impact the achievement of all these sustainable development goals by 2030. And we need to specifically talk about the impact of heat wave or heat stress on India. So how this heat wave would impact India. Now it is actually felt that India has been undergoing a consistent increase in the temperatures annually. Temperatures in India have been increasing annually. However, by 2030, an estimated 160 million to 200 million individuals across the nation may face the risk of experiencing deadly heat waves every year. Right? So around 160 million to 200 million Indian workforce may face or may experience the deadly heat wave like conditions. In 2024 also we have seen a deadly heat wave like conditions that has led to the death of several individuals. And in fact, 34 million people in India will also experience job losses. Right, so they will also experience job losses because whenever the productivity is reduced and they are not able to work with their full ability, then it would also lead to the increased job losses. So according to the International Labour Organization statistics, because of heat stress and heat wave like conditions, 34 million people in India will experience job losses. That is because of reduced productivity when they are exposed to heat stress. And in fact, it is also expected that in India there will be a significant decline in the full-time employment also by 2030, and this is also assumed to the increasing heat wave and heat stress like conditions. However, in this respect, a preparation of heat wave action plan is very important to protect the workers, especially the workers who have been engaged in the informal sector. Heat wave action plans have to be created. There were national guidelines to create heat wave action plans across different levels, at the local level and at the state level and at the national level, so to protect people from the extreme heat stress and heat waves, and specifically workers, construction and agricultural workers. So they are aimed or designed to protect Indian workforce from the negative impact of heat wave like conditions. And in fact, the heat wave action plans are designed to help public to create heat wave action plans, right? So these heat wave action plans will be implemented rural, urban and district, state and at the national level, and their overall focus will be on the general population, helping general population coping up with the extreme heat wave and heat stress like conditions. So what are the measures that have to be taken? So number of measures have to be taken to protect the workers from the extreme heat wave and heat stress, and also reduce the negative impact on the health of the workers because of the heat wave like conditions. So first and foremost thing, we need to systematically educate workers about the negative impact of the heat wave, and we should also ensure regular and proper hydration in all those industries where workers have been working and we felt that those workers are vulnerable to heat wave and heat stress. And apart from that, it is also important that we need to manage the work schedules, and we should also immediately offer medical facilities when anyone exposed to the heat stress or heat wave, so that we could retain the efficiency and productivity of those workers even if they are exposed to the heat wave like conditions. And apart from that, we need to focus on improving implementation of international labor standards. So these labor standards have to be implemented across different levels, and that should be related to the occupational safety and health, so that we could protect the workers from the heat stress and heat wave like conditions. And countries like India, which are more vulnerable to the heat wave like conditions, could be able to ensure that these workers are protected through adequate measures taken across different levels. Okay, so next important article is about female labor force participation rate, and a recent economic survey that was presented by the Office of Economic Advisor, Chief Economic Advisor, that was introduced in the parliament. So this economic survey has been emphasizing that the female labor force participation rate has been increasing in recent times, and in fact it is a positive news, it is a welcome news, because a country like India, where is a significant gender disparities and a very low women participation in the workforce, so it is very important that we need to substantially increase the female labor force participation, because it has economic implications and social implications also. Now we'll talk about the context. The context is that the economic survey has held that India has been making a transition from women's development to women-led development. Now women-led development in the sense that women being part of the workforce and women becoming entrepreneurs. And in fact, according to the economic survey, it is held that there has been a 218.8% increase in the total budgetary allocations for various schemes for the welfare and empowerment of women, right? So the budgetary allocations for the empowerment of women has been significantly increased in recent times. And in fact, when we talk about women's workforce participation in India, so women have been facing the motherhood penalty. Now what is this motherhood penalty? Whenever women arrived or women came to the motherhood age, so they would be dropped from the workforce, they would be dropped from the education. So that is the motherhood penalty that Indian women have been facing. So motherhood penalty actually means a drop in female labor force participation rate around the childbearing years, so that is motherhood penalty. And in fact, so when we talk about the share of welfare schemes which are aiming at the improvement of conditions of women, so that particular budgetary allocations are known as gender budget. So the share of gender budget in the total union budget has actually increased to 6.5%, right? So it has increased to 6.5% in the financial year 2015 according to the economic survey. So in fact, the budgetary allocations in the financial year 2015 are one of the highest since the introduction of gender budgeting scheme in financial year 2016. Now when we talk about the gender budgeting scheme, specific allocations that are being made to women for their welfare and improvement of conditions of women, so that specific allocations are known as gender budgeting scheme, and this gender budgeting scheme was introduced for the first time in the year 2016 for the improvement of conditions of women through budgetary allocations. And after that, we should also talk about the skilling schemes. So there are number of skill development programs that the central government has launched, and these skill development programs have also been emphasizing on the skill development, training and entrepreneurship development among women. For example, one such skill development program that the central government has launched for trained women, Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana. Under this particular program of skill development, so women were also given training, and they were also skilled, right? So women's number of women who were trained under Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana had increased from 42.7% in the financial year 2015-16 to 52.3% in the financial year 2013 and 2023 and 24. So it has been indicating that women have been coming forward, and they are they actually have interested in skill development and training. So that is actually a positive outcome, a positive news. So under the Jan Shikshan Sansthan scheme also, women constituted about 82% of the total beneficiaries. So all these things have been indicating that there has been a substantial increase in the women's participation in the workforce, because women are getting training, women are getting skills through various these programs. So that over a period of time would increase women's participation in the workforce, and this particular gender gap in the women's workforce participation would also be minimized substantially. Now when we talk about the women's participation across different levels, rural area and urban area, so women's workforce participation in rural area is comparatively higher. Now in 2017-18, women workforce participation was just 23.3%, but now in 2020-23 it has increased to 37%, especially in the across rural and urban areas, right? So especially in rural areas. So when we talk about the rural areas, in rural areas women workforce participation is 23.3%, and it has increased to 37% in 2022-23. And in fact, the government has also launched a financial inclusion scheme of Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana, and this scheme was launched by the union government in the year 2015 for opening bank accounts, and most of the beneficiaries of Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana were women, right? So 52.3 crore bank accounts were opened under Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana, of which 55.6% of account holders are women itself. So this indicating that a financial inclusion on the part of the woman as well. So however, so we need to delve into the crucial aspect of care economy also, because a care economy is one such economy where women have a lot of potential. So a care economy would create a large scale employment opportunities for a woman. Now in fact, if we look at the statistics of care economy, the direct public investment would be equivalent to 2% of GDP. So in case, imagine that in the care economy, especially in the care economy, if we have made an investment of 2% of India's GDP, so this could create, or the care economy has the potential of generating 11 million jobs in this sector, nearly 70% of which would go to the women. So therefore, large scale employment opportunities would be created from the care economy if we made a substantial investments into it. And apart from that, the care sector is also one of the fastest growing sector globally. So according to some estimates, so the care sector estimated to generate 475 million jobs globally by 2030. So therefore, you can imagine the potential of care economy creating large scale employment opportunities for women, and that would substantially increases women's workforce participation, labor force participation of women also. That is very important for an emerging economy like India or like ours. But one thing is that care economy requires a substantial investment before. So both public sector and private sector can invest in the care sector. Okay, so next article is European Union carbon border adjustment mechanism. So this is also a very important aspect, because in recent times the carbon border adjustment mechanism is in news. So economic survey has also saying that this carbon border adjustment mechanism is actually it is protectionist in nature. Now if you look at the European countries, the capitalist countries, they becoming inward looking, they becoming protectionist, and they're not ready to open their economies for the products of India and other developing countries in the global south. So that trend is known as a protectionist trend. In fact, center has recently raised concerns with respect to the protectionist measures such as the European Union carbon border adjustment mechanism, right? So in fact, the economic survey has said that the carbon border adjustment mechanism went against the spirit of Paris Climate Agreement, because Paris Climate Agreement mandated that common but differentiated responsibilities, right? Because we are a developing country and it takes a lot of time for us, it takes a lot of finances and technology for us, but at this point of time we are a developing country with a substantial number of poor, and we are also not responsible to the present levels of climate change. So we have given some more time to reduce our emissions by the Paris climate deal. So therefore, this carbon border adjustment mechanism of European Union is inherently discriminatory and it is a protectionist measure. That is what the center has says, because the carbon border adjustment mechanism of European Union essentially close gates for India's products entry into the European Union. For example, India cannot export steel, iron, aluminium. Those products cannot be exported to European Union. So even if India wanted to export those goods into the European Union markets, so these goods have to pay the higher taxes or higher tariffs, right? So that is the carbon border adjustment mechanism that was recently launched by the European Union. Now first we will briefly talk about what exactly is this carbon border adjustment mechanism, right? So carbon border adjustment mechanism. Now when we talk about the carbon border adjustment mechanism, so most of these European Union countries have decided that they would become net zero by 2050. Right, so they would become net zero by 2050. So in order to become net zero by 2050, the European Union countries have mandated to their industries that you need to reduce the emission intensity of your industries. So you need to reduce the emissions from the industries. So in order to reduce emissions from the industries, they have to use less fossil fuels and they have to have advanced technologies. So those technologies will help achieve energy efficiency. And apart from that, so they would use renewable energy resources. So therefore it would be bit costly for them, costly for these industries to adopt more technology and less fossil fuels, and even adopting renewable energy would cost these industries more. So therefore compared to the products which are manufactured through fossil fuels, which are heavily having a fossil fuel, or fossil fuels would result in emission intensity. So in India, countries like India, there are no such strong emission norms, because the Paris climate deal already provided us some sort of a leverage. So because of the heavy costs in European Union, companies would increase the prices of the goods that were manufactured by these industries. But on the other hand, so there are no such restrictions in India because of the Paris climate deal, so the goods would be cheaper compared to the European Union goods. So when these Indian goods enter into the European Union markets, so they have to pay the carbon tax. So they have to pay the carbon tax, and only then Indian goods will be allowed to export into the European Union. So this is essentially to bring in some sort of a level playing field between the European Union companies and Indian companies. But now Indian companies have to pay the higher taxes to enter into the European Union. So that would substantially reduce the total number of exports into the European Union. So that is the actual idea of carbon border adjustment mechanism. Now carbon border adjustment mechanism, so as it called, are tariffs, right? So it is a tariff and that will apply on the energy intensive goods. For example, in India, we produce energy intensive goods, emission intensity goods using fossil fuels. So in those goods, these tariffs will be enforced. And in fact, the European Union has been saying that this is to bring a level playing field between the European Union producers and at the same time the producers from other countries which have the higher emission content or higher carbon content. But on the other hand, it essentially means that penalizing Indian products which are imported or which are exported to the European Union. And in fact, India not only has to deal with the climate change, India has to deal with the climate change, and India has to undertake the energy transition also over a period of time. So, but India should also deal with the growing protectionism across the world, especially in the Western developed countries. There is a growing level of protectionism, and this protectionism actually closing their gates for the exports from the developing countries, and that would substantially impact the growth and development of these developing countries. And in fact, Europe has been making all the preparations to implement this carbon border adjustment tax, and both United States and United Kingdom are also at a different stages of imposing their versions of this carbon taxes very soon also. So that will be one of the factor which will impact India's exports into European Union and other developed countries in the West. So these taxes are in contravention to the spirit of the Paris Agreement, because Paris Agreement mandated common but differentiated responsibilities. So common but differentiated responsibilities essentially provides some sort of a leverage for the Indian companies to gradually shift towards less energy intensive, more energy efficient, more technological and renewable energy resources. So that would reduces the emission intensity of these industries, right? So this is what the Indian government has been saying, that it is against the principle or the spirit of the common but differentiated responsibility of Paris Agreement. And in fact, it is expected that the carbon border adjustment mechanism is expected to enforce on June 1st, 2026. And in fact, India is one of the top 8 countries that will be significantly impacted by the carbon border adjustment mechanism as per the report by Global Trade and Research Initiative. And apart from that, if we look at the statistics of India's total exports into the European Union in the year 2022, 27% of India's exports of iron, steel and aluminium products, so worth of 8.2 billion, went to the European Union markets. So if European Union imposes carbon border adjustment mechanism, Indian products such as steel, aluminium and iron would get significantly impacted, and that would also impact India's economic growth and also employment trends in India. So you can go through the definition of carbon border adjustment mechanism. So it is a carbon tariff. So that is a tariff on carbon intensive products such as iron, steel and aluminium, which uses fossil fuels for its production, and it would also releases a large scale emissions into the atmosphere. Right. So whenever European Union imports such products, steel, carbon, cement and other products, so they would impose this carbon tax on those products. Only then they will allow these products into their markets. And next important article is mental health is a key driver of individual nation development, right? So we'll talk about mental health. Mental health is also one of the a significant issue, so that requires adequate attention. So the acknowledgement of mental health as a principally impactful driver of individual and national development. Now mental health have a huge repercussions on individual health, and it would also impact the national development and growth also. So for the first time, it exclusively highlights its significance and implications of the policy recommendations. The economic survey has focused on the mental health issues. So according to the economic survey, so at an aggregate economic level, so mental health disorders, right? So there are a number of mental health disorders, and this particular mental health or mental stress would be associated with the productivity losses. Okay, so it creates productivity losses, like how heat stress would be associated with the productivity losses. Mental health would also be associated with the productive losses across various levels. So that is specifically because of losses due to the absenteeism, decreased productivity, disability on the part of the workers because of the mental stress, and increased healthcare costs and so on. And that would result in increased or significant increase in the productivity losses of the workforce. And in fact, There's also evidence that poverty has been exacerbating the risk of mental health, specifically because stressful living conditions of people who are poor and financial instability and increasing the debt burden, and even the lack of opportunities for the people for the upward mobility, all these factors have been increasing the mental health disorders among the people. So we can say that poverty is one of the crucial reason for increasing mental health issues among the people, and it has been contributing to the increased psychological distress as well. Now, according to some data from National Mental Health Survey, it was conducted in 2015-16, around 10.6% of the adults in India have been suffering from these mental disorders. And apart from that, when we talk about the mental health disorders or people who have the mental health issues in metropolitan and urban centers, it is 13.5%, and in rural areas it is 6.9%. So this has been indicating that there are a significant number of people with mental health issues in the metropolitan and urban areas than in the rural areas. And in fact, so one of the reason that has led to a significant increase in the mental health issues and mental stress among the people is a COVID-19 pandemic and a prolonged lockdown. So all these factors have substantially increased the prevalence of mental health or mental distress, and reorganizing mental health as a fundamental aspect of overall well-being. So in fact, the survey has also recommended proper implementation of healthcare programs, right? So if we implement these healthcare programs properly, then there is a hope that these mental health and mental distress among the people could be cope up with, and there will be acceleration in the improvements in the mental health care. And apart from that, the government is working on standardizing guidelines for the mental health services across government and even the private sector as well. So standardization of guidelines in the mental health services is also very, very important, and the government has been working on this. So bringing in effective pathways for integrating mental health interventions in schools, colleges, and appropriate mental health curriculum in the syllabus, and even encouraging early intervention and increasing awareness about the mental health. All these interventions are very, very important to adequately deal with the mental health related problems. So therefore, we need to identify the negative consequences of the mental health and mental distress, and then adequate interventions should be formulated to deal with this particular stress. Okay, so that's all in this lecture, and thank you so much. So if you like our work, please subscribe our YouTube channel and also hit the like button. Thank you.